comes to academics, no teacher. When it comes to academics, no teacher is all replaced by AI.
Students in a physics class had deeper levels of engagement and performed better with an AI tutor than with a Harvard professor. Starting in pre-K, we pay kids. We pay them cold hard cash, baby. We pay kids for hitting their academic goals.
Your goal with Alpha is to combine the Plato-Aristotle aristocratic education and turn it for the masses.
So in a traditional system, when a student's not doing well, it's usually considered the student's fault. We believe that if a child is not thriving in our system, it's our fault. It's the school's fault. We're 28th in the world in math. We have a third of students that are not reading at grade level. We have not seen such poor learning for 30 years, since the 90s.
Mackenzie Price 是 Alpha 学校的创始人，这是一所由 AI 教授全部授课的学校。从幼儿园一直到高中，他们的学生每天只在学业上花费2到3个小时，却能在标准化考试中常年保持全美的前1%，顺利地进入了顶尖高校。我们将在本期节目中一起探讨 Alpha 是如何用 AI 做到这些的，而他们的体系对教育哲学最根本的问题又有何启发？美德真的能教出来吗？天赋还是后天培养更重要？外部激励与内在动力究竟是什么关系？ So you begin your latest essay on the issues of modern education with a quote from Fichte, commenting on the Prussian education system, which our current education system is built upon. And this is the
all these
quote.
Years later.
Yeah, this is the Fichte quote. Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. Tell us about the true origins of modern education and what's wrong with it.
What every parent dreams, that their child will grow up to be docile, obedient, silent, and non-thinking for themselves, right? Exactly.
Right.
We had a way of educating people where it was based on, tutors. And think of Socrates tutoring Plato, who tutored Aristotle, who tutored Alexander the Great, who went on to conquer, the known world. But it was reserved for the elite, right? It was for the rich. And there was a mass of people who were never going to become learned, right? Then in the 1800s, there was a man named Horace Mann, and he started the Massachusetts Board of Education, and he had a very noble goal. He wanted to figure out how to help educate the masses, not just make education something for the rich, but how can he help everybody? And he was super motivated by the Prussian education system, which had figured out how to educate a lot of people in a time-based system. And that is really where the start of the teacher in front of the classroom model was born. But here was the challenge. It was really had some, I think, darker undertones and darker goals.
Authoritarian, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had the Industrial Revolution coming on. We needed to figure out, how do we train factory workers? How do we get people to be compliant and to do as told? And, Rockefeller was one of the people who really, I think when we look at it, had some, dark ambitions for raising up this next generation of people that would learn how to be good factory workers. Now, what's crazy about that? That was happening in the 1800s. It is 2025, and not much has changed. Whether you go to, a rural school in India, or you go to one of the most elite private schools in New York City, you basically will see the same thing when it comes to how we educate young people. You'll see a teacher leading a group of students in a classroom.
And I wanted to start our conversation off with this discussion because I wanted to tell our audience what the stakes are. Because it's not just about how good is their SAT score. It's not just about how much knowledge can cram into them. In education, this is why the great philosophers Plato, Rousseau cared so much about education as a political kind of object, is because it's the very formation of a citizenry. My understanding is that your goal with Alpha is to combine the Plato-Aristotle aristocratic education and turn it for the masses, make it for the masses, right? So it's a synthesis of these two kinds of education. So tell us how you've started Alpha and how you want to go about accomplishing this ambitious goal.
Absolutely. When I became a mom, it was time for my daughters to go off to school. My husband and I decided to send them off to a really fantastic public school. Both my husband and I were public school products. And so it was time for them to go. Put my girls on the bus on their first days. And then I noticed exactly the kind of challenges that, we've talked about in this larger historical context. They were told to sit still and learn to raise their hand and ask permission to go to the bathroom and wait quietly while the rest of the class was doing something else, whatever that was. And it sort of culminated for me in a conversation about halfway through my oldest daughter's second grade year. She and I were talking one day and she said, "I don't want to go to school tomorrow, Mom." And I said, "What do you mean? You love school." And she looked at me and she said, "School is so boring." And I just had this moment of like, oh my goodness, in 2.5 years, they have taken this kid who is like tailor-made to be a great student and a curious, interested learner, and they've wiped away that passion. And when I say they, it wasn't the incredible teachers that she was working with every day.
It was a system.
It was the system. It was this teacher in front of the classroom system, right? And we have known for 40 years, there have been thousands of papers that have gone and talked about how kids can learn 2, 5, 10 times faster in that one-to-one mastery-based tutoring environment like Plato and Aristotle. And every single one of those papers has started or ended with, unfortunately, this can't be done in a traditional classroom as we know it. And so in 2014, I decided to take matters in my own hands and started the first school. We started with 16 kids, and my girls were in 3rd and 1st grade. And now, 11 years later, where we are is we have been able to recreate this one-to-one mastery-based tutoring experience for many kids. And the answer is probably something that you have been studying a lot about, artificial intelligence.
All right. Before we dive into that, let me give you a challenge. Let me play a devil's advocate, or in this case, Fichte's advocate.
All right, I love it.
Which is, when Fichte talks about destroying the individual will, it's to make citizens that can obey a higher order, such that the nation state can function as one and adapt in this kind of modern industrial world. And I think you and I, who have both run companies before, in your case, it's a school, but it's clear that in a company, you actually don't want everyone to be an independent thinker, especially about the most fundamental parts of a company. Sometimes you just want people who can execute, right? So let's say you accomplish your ambitious goal and you educate 1 billion kids or something, all with this new alpha model, right? What Plato and Aristotle was into antiquity, what the Prussian system was to modernity, alpha will be, this AI-based one will be for post-modernity, let's say, and we get a whole citizenry of independent citizens. Is that going to create some kind of chaos in our society? Is that going to screw up our political economic system?
Absolutely not. I think what it is going to do is it's going to allow us to unlock human potential. And I think that the more informed, the more educated, the better critical thinkers we have, and people who can be clear about the intersection of their passions and their talents, and whether that be plumbing or it's running government offices, right? It's any of those things. I just never see a world where people having access to phenomenal education that helps them live up to whatever their potential is a bad thing.
I see. So I've had the pleasure of shadowing you for this last week, visiting all these different alpha schools in Miami, in Austin, and the results you're getting from a standard test perspective is incredible. You're consistently bringing these kids up to 99th percentile, regardless of where they started. A lot of these kids were behind. And what's even crazier is that they're only spending 2 hours a day doing this. So they're getting 2x the amount of learning with 20% the amount of time, a 5x reduction in time. And so tell us about the AI system and the software that you guys have developed that enables this.
So what we've really realized with artificial intelligence is it finally gives us the ability to provide that one-to-one mastery-based experience for every single kid. So to be clear, this is not a robot teacher standing in front of a classroom guiding 25 kids. These are every single kid has their own personalized learning platform that is figuring out exactly what a child knows, what a child doesn't know, what their pace of learning is, and how they can get to mastery in the quickest ways possible. And so the thing that's so interesting is having to spend hours and hours a day plus homework to do academics. It's just not true. When you're getting that one-to-one personalized learning experience, academics can be done, and not just done, crushed in only a couple of hours a day. And, standardized tests in a traditional system, the kid takes the tests, and then afterwards, whatever the results are, nothing changes for that child.
Right.
Based on
about the learning experience.
Nothing for that child changes. Alternatively, when you think about the model that we have now and what's possible with having a personalized learning platform is a child can take that standardized test, and then it gives us so much information on a very granular level of what a child knows and what they don't know. And then what we can do is we can feed those results into our personalized AI tutor so that we can develop lessons that meet those holes that a kid has. And so, when you think about it, we start off in kindergarten and first grade. We're learning our ABCs. We're learning addition and subtraction. Over time, in math, it goes to multiplication and division. Pretty soon you're doing fractions, then you're doing algebra, you're going up to calculus. And, what happens in that traditional system is when a child is not getting mastery of the fundamentals, as they move up, they're developing holes, and they're basically building a very shaky, what I think of as a Jenga tower. Yeah, a Jenga tower. And so it's really hard to do algebra if your fractions aren't quite there.
Right.
It's hard to know your fractions well if your multiplication table is shaky, right? And in that traditional system where a kid could miss a day of school or have a not great teacher or just simply not be catching on. Once they fall behind, they just keep falling further and further behind. Whereas in this personalized learning system, we take the information to build that solid foundation. We can actually finally teach kids to mastery that goes at their pace, not at the pace of a time-based classroom.
Right, I see. I remember you sharing me a statistic that's wild, which is how many percent of American high schoolers can't read or something?
Yeah, so, the United States, you'd think we'd be good at math, right? You'd think we're a developed nation. We should be pretty good at this. We are, a major entrepreneurial capital. We're 28th in the world in math, right? And we have a third of students that are not reading at grade level. The nation's report card came out at the beginning of this year, and it was dismal. We have not seen such poor learning for 30 years, since the 90s. And,
right.
Everyone thought this was a COVID issue and that we'd catch up. And the problem is, and now it highlights this exact problem, which is during COVID, we had so much learning loss. And then suddenly these kids who hadn't gotten a great second or third or fourth grade experience, suddenly they're in fifth grade, and that poor teacher has no choice but to teach fifth grade curriculum. You cannot take a teacher and give them 20 plus students and say, okay, I'm going to help the student who needs to go back to second grade. I'm also going to help the student who could be doing seventh grade work. It's just not possible. And that's what's so exciting about this new kind of transformation we have in education, where we can finally turn that model on its side.
Right. And so the theory of knowledge you're positing is that it's like a sequence. And if you miss one part of early in the chain, it's the other parts of the chain aren't going to make sense because they build off of that, right? And so this is why the assumption is this works not just to speed up the kids who are doing really well in school, who are bored. I spoke English like this when I was 6. I had to go through 7 years of English class in China. You're just bored through the whole time. But this is also why it's supposed to help the left tail and bring that up as well, because it's about fixing those holes, right? And so it's one part of your system is meeting the kid and deploying the exact thing that is able to challenge them, right? But there's also something else, which is creating dynamic content that fits their interests and joining the knowledge and the interest graph. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's the other thing that is so exciting is that what artificial intelligence allows us to do, besides the ability to precisely measure and then provide lessons that meet the academic knowledge level that a student has. So basically take that knowledge graph, but we can now overlap that with their interest graph.
Right.
So that little 7-year-old boy who hates to read, but his favorite movies are the Avenger movies, and his best friends are the kids on his soccer team, and he loves his grandparents on his mom's side. Suddenly we can create a reading story that's delivered at the Lexile level, the reading level that he needs, where he and his soccer buddies are the main characters in a Save the World Avenger style movie, where they start off by, eating milk and cookies at the grandparents' house before they go on to that adventure. And suddenly you've got a kid who's interested in reading because we've connected with that. And that's the thing that's beautiful about generative AI, is that we can really tailor and customize learning for students based on those interests. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And, we have students who are trying to learn math, and maybe that girl who loves fashion design needs to connect math lessons with her interest in fashion, or the kid who loves baseball statistics, and we can incorporate math into that. My own daughter, when she was taking AP art history, she was able to basically create songs using AI that were in the style of Taylor Swift songs that helped her memorize the canons and what she needed to know. And I will tell you, that was a very fun time in our house when I would hear my daughter singing about art throughout the ages in the same melody of a Taylor Swift song.
Right. Okay. So we talked about correct placement, right? Giving them the exact kind of knowledge that they need to advance the next chain in the sequence. We talked about the correct content, giving them the exact content that they would be most interested in. There seems to be a third leg that your system stands on, which is tracking, right? Because you're doing it in a fully digital environment, you're able to monitor everything and generate these incredible reports about how much time is wasted, and predict whether they're distracted. So tell us about the entire tracking system you have.
Well, this system knows exactly what a student is learning and how quickly they're learning. And it's something that the child can see, their teachers can see, and their parents can see literally on a daily basis. So, for example, we can basically predict how long a lesson should take for a student, and then if that student is taking longer than we predict they would take, why? Is it because the material's too hard? And if so, how do we slow that down? If the material's too easy, what's the level of accuracy they have? We're finally able to implement all of those learning principles that we've known for so long around how to do that. So like the zone of proximal development, right? Understanding that if a kid is being challenged too much, where their brain starts to kind of short circuit, that's not going to be a helpful place for them to be. Versus if they're already know everything and it's too easy for them, that's not helpful. What we've shown is somewhere in that 85% area where a kid is learning at just the right pace, where they're challenged, but they're not overloaded, right? The other thing that we can see, and what's so exciting when we think about how learning science can go to that next level, is we can take things like cognitive load theory, and we can actually be able to measure and analyze how a student does. So for example, Jonathan, if it only takes you 5 reps of a concept to understand that concept, then our personalized learning system can deliver those 5 reps to you. If it takes me 15, then I'm going to need a lot more than 5. I need that 15. And to be able to look at every single child and be able to understand how are we basically maximizing what we call their cognitive load and their working memory slots, we can make sure that we are feeding kids academic knowledge at the pace that allows their brain to learn this knowledge and then transfer it to long-term memory. On top of that, the other thing that's really cool about this AI tutor, and I will say better than a human tutor, is that we can also implement things like regular quizzing, right? To be able to understand, does a child understand this? And then we can also do spaced repetition, where we can revisit topics from a day, a week, a month before on a regular basis. Unlike, standard school, where I may or may not have crammed a lot when I was, a kid. Instead, we're really making sure kids are learning to mastery before they move forward, and that they're regularly being quizzed and reminded of this, so that they will hold on to this knowledge for a long time.
Right. And just so our audience doesn't get the wrong view, this is not a Optimus robot sitting in front of a kid, nor is it a chat interface that they interact with. So these are pre-planned modules that have flexibility in the way that you described. That's part of a holistic sort of system. So there's a lot of guardrails and stuff, right?
There is, and actually, that's a great point you bring up because when people think about AI in education, they think of ChatGPT creating lessons for kids and teaching fifth grade math. And we absolutely are not doing that. First of all, the curriculum that we're using in our personalized learning platforms is U.S. Common Core curriculum in K through 8. It's advanced placement curriculum in high school. So it's the same material that students in a traditional classroom are learning. It's not being made up. But the other thing that we have realized, and I think so many people, when they think about AI in education, they get confused on, they think of a GPT, like a chat GPT interface, a chatbot coming in. Here's what we've found. When kids are given a chatbot, they usually will use it to cheat. Right? And you'd love to have this thought that, a student is talking with a chatbot and they're having this incredible Socratic debate and discussion and they're saying, explain to me more how this physics concept works and how this is happening. But what they're really doing is they're copy, paste, please provide the answer, let me do that. And so that's actually one fundamental part of the system we do not have. We do not have a chatbot interface within our AI tutor. When we think about an AI tutor, we're really thinking about that underlying platform that is measuring, monitoring, and understanding, a child's learning journey.
It's about the analysis. It's the analysis rather than,
It's the analysis of the system. And it's, so if you talk to one of our students, and you say, tell us about your AI tutor, they're not going to tell you about some cute name of a little chatbot that pops up and teaches them about things. They're going to talk about the adaptive apps that they're using. They're going to talk about how when it's time for them to do math, they're taken directly to the lesson that they need to be doing at the right level. They're going to be talking about how they're challenged and engaged, but it's not too hard and it's not so easy, right?
Right, I see. So you talked about how you're basically still trying to sprint through the Common Core curriculum, standardized testing. Part of that is practical, right? If you want to go to a college, you just need to do this stuff. For another example is people won't believe your results, right? If you don't use standardized testing. You're okay, fine, and we're learning 10x faster. That's crazy, but you can actually now show it. Let's say that those constraints weren't there. What do you think about the Common Core curriculum itself? Like, if those constraints weren't there, would you actually want to feed other kind of facts into a child's brain?
So I actually think that you just have to put as much academic knowledge into your brain as possible. And if we really want to raise great critical thinkers, it is imperative that there is knowledge in the brain upon which to draw from, right? And so I do think it's really important to just make sure we have basic academic knowledge, right? We should make sure that students are fluent in things like what's 7 times 8, what's 10,000 times, 1,000. When kids have that basic information, it enables them to actually exponentially learn, right? And think about the power of an analogy, right? If I am explaining something to you, Jonathan, that you're struggling with, and then I can compare it to something that you already know, it makes things so much more powerful. And that's what we're really doing. So I kind of look at it from almost a very utilitarian perspective, which is it makes your brain a more interesting place to hang out, right? When you're able to have more complex thoughts, when you're able to pull up information. And then what it also allows us to do is if we can have that base academic knowledge, it allows us to then take that information and go incorporate that into something that we're doing that's interesting, which is a whole other part of what our school focuses on.
Which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So now on one hand, it is about just being able to shove knowledge into your brain more securely, 10x faster, right? 2x learning at 1/5 the time. But now I want to pull this back into the Prussian model about why education is so important. Because it's not just about sticking facts into the brain. It's about forming a kind of character or self-view. And the most incredible thing that I've encountered when I've talked to alpha students is whenever they approach a problem, it's never, I'm not a math guy, Jonathan, I'm not a math guy, or like, I'm just not dumb. It's just, I haven't put the work into it, which is an incredible thing for kids to think about. Because I remember myself, like, I started Chinese like a year later than my class. And for, the first 7 grades in China, I always thought, well, I'm just not a humanities person. until I went to, until I actually worked on my essays, and I'm like, no, this is the exact same as math, which is what I'm good at. But so I guess what I'm trying to say is like being able to do so well in these standardized tests and master these materials, the even greater benefit than making your mind a more interesting place to live in is that you have a fundamental different view of yourself.
A completely different view. And here's what we think about. In this time-based traditional system, if a child struggles and isn't understanding something, it goes straight into who they view themselves at their core identity. I'm dumb, or I'm not a math person, or I'm just not good at writing. And what we very much believe all kids can be capable and successful at core academics, as long as they're given that pace and that level of learning. And so we absolutely teach our students that if you put in the time, you put in the effort, you can get the results. And what that does is it creates confidence that's based on competence, and it allows kids to then realize, hey, I can absolutely do anything if I put that time in. And if you compare to what's often the philosophy of this age, it's this self-love, self-confidence thing that just says, Jonathan, you are a great person,
Positive
you are
affirmations,
smart,
right?
you are sharp, and that. And the problem with that is, someone will look at that and go, well, my parents are telling me I'm so smart, but I don't feel smart. I feel challenged, and I feel like I don't understand what's going on.
Right. And my grades are shit.
It doesn't match what you're telling me. And you know what? People are really able to understand reality, right? If you have a reality quotient that's like, no, none of what you're saying is making sense. And what we can do is the exact opposite. And, for example, at our school, science, 8th grade science is actually pretty easy to be 99th percentile in.
Right.
And so it's often what we will call a confidence anchor. We'll have students focus on, getting to the 99th percentile in science. And they get there and they think, wow, I never thought I could be this good at science. And then when they're challenged in math or they're challenged in English, and they can say, hey, if I got there in science, I bet I can do it here. And what we're doing with these young people is we're helping them develop that sense of confidence based on competence, on hard work, putting the time in. It creates a culture that's really quite beautiful. It also creates a culture where kids are respectful of each other. They respect the time and work that people put in. They respect the talents that each of them brings to the table. And they also respect that idea of working as a team, as well as individual contributing.
Yeah. I think this is a good balance between the kind of East Asian education, because I went to the local school in China, which is just, it doesn't really emphasize like making you a confident self-view at all. It's just about, let's get the work done, man. Like, let's hunker down 12 hours a day. Let's do your math problems. And the kind of, this is a caricature, the California model. Okay, you're amazing. Like, you've done nothing, which I absolutely hate. But what's so interesting about what you're suggesting, and this is a Hegelian point, that for your self-view to change in a healthy way, that self-view needs to be actually grounded in something.
Grounded in reality.
And so the real benefit of this system, of being able to show kids they can ace these standardized tests, is to give them a grounding upon which they can actually build a good self-view, right?
Yeah, and I think that people will hear this and think, oh, it's all just about standardized tests, right?
Right.
Standardized tests are that third-party objective measure that can show how students are doing, but students are also getting that on a daily basis as they're actively engaged going through lessons, and they're saying, you got that one right, you got this right, you're understanding this explanation, and they're able to see, like, I can put this time in, and in a couple hours a day, I can get more done than kids sitting in school for 6.
Right. And I think many successful people have all learned that lesson by accident when they were children, that the world is malleable if they just put in the work. So for me, I was quite clever growing up. I never really paid attention to anything. And I was naturally good at, obviously, English, because I was raised here also, and also math. Until I started playing basketball when I was in 7th grade. And I realized that, like, each unit time I put in just practicing boring dribbling moves directly, like, the next day started showing up and how much I increased in games. And so what's really exciting is you guys have systematized these kinds of learnings so that it's no longer accidental. You don't have to luck into it like I did, right?
Yeah. Well, and if it's the kind of thing where, if I said to you, Jonathan, I'm going to give you $10 million if you win Wimbledon, you'd look at me and you'd be like, I don't care if it's $10 billion. I don't know how to win Wimbledon. I can't
Right.
just go win Wimbledon. But if I said, Jonathan, I'm going to give you $10 million if you go out and you practice 4 hours a day for
Right.
the next 3 years, you'd be like, I know how to do that. And what we're doing is we're really creating self-driven learners
There you
who
go.
have a sense of agency. They take ownership over their learning experience, and they understand that they can learn to learn. And when they sit down and get that right level of material, they're able to go. And if you contrast that again with kind of a traditional school system, there's generally two things that enable students to do well in a traditional school system. One is IQ based. How smart are you? And you just mentioned yourself, you found school pretty easy, right? You could kind of coast through. The other part is really based on kind of the level of conscientiousness that is
Blinder. How can you grind?
well,
Yeah.
can you grind? Are you willing to play the game like I was? And so in a traditional system, when a student's not doing well, it's usually considered the student's fault. It's either, hey, they're not the sharpest kid, they're not great at math, or they're lazy, they're disengaged, they're not doing something. We take the opposite approach. We believe that if a child is not thriving in our system, it's our fault. It's the school's fault. And there's two reasons.